Hey guys, this is going to be my review of the third episode of Vigil. So, full spoilers from the beginning, as always. And this is my least favourite episode of this series so far. At times, it was like watching paint dry for me in this one. So, we sort of start off with a reveal that Amy finds out that there's toxin in the throat of the other sailor, the other crew member who's sort of turned up dead, and it's similar toxin to which was found in Burke's system. So this sort of alerts her suspicions even more, and the focus of the episode, as far as Amy is concerned, mostly turns to the doctor, to Doherty, who she suspects might be hiding or might have been involved in switching the test results. So we get further into that whole side of things. Because we sort of hear quite early in the episode that the Navy have that after a famous trip to Florida when the crew went a bit sort of berserk and appeared to be wrecking havoc and on something, they did their own in-house testing which came back negative. And obviously the police side of thing with Amy and also Christian on the shore, they don't quite buy that they think there must have been something that they were on. And then you have this stuff with Burke and this other dead sailor, so that's where the suspicion falls. And Amy obviously interviews the doctor, and at the same time there's a picture that gets discovered of the doctor and a mysterious man with a tattoo. There's something Christian finds, and this potentially, because it came from the same USB stick which they found, which was obviously Burke's, and it potentially means that he was blackmailing the doctor. Has obviously a photo of her, sleeping with another crew member. So that gets revealed at the end. But just talking about a couple of the issues I have with this episode is, first of all, they go even further with the flashbacks in this episode, which I didn't like from the other two. I think it gets even more melodramatic and sort of kind of contrived and very sort of soapy. And the thing is, if you compare this to something like Line of Duty, okay, there were sort of subplots in that had that sort of a feel, but I think the reason they always worked and didn't stand out and didn't feel sort of clunky is because they always did a good job of like connecting them to the main plot, to the case, in a satisfying sort of way, where you came out and said, okay, that makes sense. And also obviously as you got further into Line of Duty, you were invested in the characters. This is obviously only the third episode of this series, but to me, the whole stuff with Amy and her past with her boyfriend and her child, who we hear at one point she's been cut off from, not allowed to see because of what happened with the boyfriend, with the father of the child. The whole thing with that to me is that it just feels like this sort of forced excuse to try and make us care about Amy. To obviously they've tied it to what's happening on the ship a little bit, but it's more than it's just a very, very tenuous link, and it doesn't seem to have enough significance to the plot, and I think it really bogs it down. I think because in this episode, for the first time, I think Saran Jones was really going through the motions. You could see at times, and the episode itself does feel like a very plodding middle of the series episode, because we're halfway through now. This is the third of 6 of this series. I don't know if there's going to be another series of this show or not, but it does feel like kind of the bit in the middle, and it's sort of plodding along, and some of the big reveals don't really feel that sort of dramatic or compelling. I'll talk about another side in a minute, but I just think that the whole melodrama with Sarai Jones's character is so forced, and it just feels sometimes in these drama series, then you just have to have like an emotional sort of link to the past, and you have to have this extra bit from the past which is sort of making you care about the character, rather than just finding the character like engaging and compelling and someone who you can really root for because she or he's trying to do the right thing and coming up against these obstacles. I mean, sometimes those basic storytelling things are all you need. You don't need this sort of kind of forced backstory, which does distract from the plot. So at one point we have like a memorial service for Burke, and then that leads to like a flashback with Amy from her boyfriend's funeral, and it really gets very melodramatic with some of the flashback scenes with the daughter. And then later on, quite late in the episode, it's Wilson, I think, or Watson. Is it? Well, sorry, it's Walsh. He sort of snaps under the pressure, and he threatens to kill himself, and Amy sort of talks him down, and it's a really terrible scene. But then we get another flashback, and it's kind of in that scene that then it's revealed that what happened to Amy and why she's been cut off from seeing her daughter, and that's when she gets some information from Walsh about what happened on the Florida trip, and then it's like revealed that two crew members were killed in like when the reactor went wrong, and he sort of describes it as being almost like another like nuclear type disaster. But again, he talks about how it was being covered up and how Burke found out about it. So we at least get a bit of like crucial information that comes from that scene, even though the scene itself I don't like. But at the same time, yes, some of this stuff it just isn't very interesting. Because another side of it is the politics in the episode, and I think sometimes it's a little heavy-handed, and it just feels a bit too forced to have like real-world politics like hinted at. Because at one point in this episode, there's this suggestion that Russia might have been the ones attacking the submarine, and they later find out it wasn't the Russians. It apparently was the Americans, a submarine from California, who are also or were tracking Vigil as well. And I think my whole thing with the politics is, unless you're gonna do it go really deep with it and make it really interesting and a bit different, then maybe leave it out, because obviously you've got a drama here which can sort of stand on its own 2 feet and work in a way that is sort of compelling and can still have this air of being a realist drama. You don't need to sort of shoehorn real world politics into it to make it feel that. And I think that's what I didn't like about the stuff with Kirsten in this episode, is because she obviously is trying to find out who killed Jade, and there's this link to this local politician, and it's sort of revealed that his boss has been paying money mysteriously into Kirsten's bank account, like a large sum of money. And when it's revealed what's going on with that, it's another sort of frustrating thing where it just feels like they had to do a red herring style plot just because it's halfway through this like series, and the way it resolved itself was sort of quite cliched and not really that interesting, because it just turns out that years ago he had an affair and he ended up with a baby, with a daughter, and wouldn't you know it, that daughter turned out to be Jade, and that's what the money's for. It's like an allowance, but he's been paying it privately to hide it from his wife, because he's in a marriage now, and the wife is not, doesn't know about it. So that's the whole reason, and he also talks a bit about that Burke had this information, and that actually he claims he was trying to get Burke to come forward and go public with it, but according to him, Burke wouldn't do it. So that feels like a very weak, sort of not very engaging plot neither, which sort of just very sort of half-hearted. And I think we jump about a lot in this episode between characters. You don't get a lot from the captain, for example, and sort of you do get the reveal by the end of who's sleeping with the doctor, because she basically denies. At one point she tells Amy that she covered up the test results, and her reasoning is because she didn't want her mates to go down for it. She says they're entitled to blow off steam, and one cock up doesn't mean they should lose their whole careers. And obviously Amy doesn't believe her. She's like saying, no, you're covering for someone, and she stands firm. And then obviously she sort of prods her about the photograph and doesn't really get anywhere with that. But it's later revealed it's the escort, basically, the crew member who's been like looking after Amy and showing her around. He's the one who's been sleeping with Doherty. I forget her first name now, but that's the person. So that's the reveal. And I guess it's the whole thing of, well, in many ways he seemed like the most trustworthy, the nicest person on board to Amy. Even though he's had his moments where he's been a little bit uptight or a little protective of the whole crew. But that's the reveal. But I just think if I was into the drama more, I would be like, oh, okay, that could be a good reveal, or this could be something. It depends what they do with it, but it's mentioned by him that Burke stole the photo off his phone. That's how he got hold of the photo, and you get a little bit of a mystery type reveal, because there's been these clues from Kirsten, like she's sending these messages to Amy and mentions about someone's favourite book, and it turns out to be the girl with the dragon tattoo, and it turns out that this character has a tattoo which is like a dragon. So that's the sort of clue, and that's the reveal. But yeah, I just thought this was very plodding, this episode. It was very sort of meh. And I'm not quite sure if the stuff with Kirsten on land is quite linking up with Amy. Another sort of frustrating thing is that you get this repetitive nature, because you've got two sides of the investigation, one on Vigil and one on land. You sort of get repetition, because you have this scene where Kirsten is just asking the same questions to like the officials on land, as obviously Amy's been asking on ship. So stuff like that just feels a bit redundant. Like, we don't really need it from two different sides. So yeah, the stuff with Kirsten isn't really doing much with me, and the stuff with Amy wasn't very good this episode neither, so it was definitely the weakest episode so far. But that's my thoughts on Vigil. Let me know yours in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll be back with more next week. See you later, guys. Goodbye.